Okay, hi everybody. I'm back. If you've seen the frequently asked questions video that I did before, basically in that video I was talking a little bit about due diligence and how we find the businesses we buy and how we make sure that after we buy them they actually perform. And I kind of said maybe I should do a video about that. So that's what this video is. Basically, the idea here is to tell you a little bit more about the types of businesses we buy, how we find them, how we operate them, how we're structured, and then how we actually, make sure that we're not buying a lemon, basically. First of all, every business we buy is offline, but that's, more or less the only thing they have in common. We have some agencies, so things like B2B services, like marketing agencies or agencies that help you rank in Google, agencies that maybe can do graphic design services for you. And we have some marketplaces, such as, think about something like eBay, but for graphic design is one. We have a supplements business that sells some, like a supplement, so it's like a physical product. We have some online courses, so somebody wants to learn how to do something, they pay a few $100s, they get access to the course. And we also have some software businesses. The reason we have such a kind of wide range of businesses is kind of twofold. One is it gives us more opportunity. If we just focused on one vertical or one business model, maybe there's not enough businesses out there for us to find. And actually, one of the questions somebody asked us was, how can you guarantee you're going to keep finding businesses to buy? And it's because we have a kind of broad universe of businesses that we target. But then the downside of that is, how are you able to operate them successfully if they're all so different? And how are you able to do due diligence on them if they're all so different? And so the answer to that is because we're decentralized. And if you think about companies like Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway, compared to, say, something like Hewlett-Packard or General Electric, Berkshire Hathaway is decentralized. They'll buy a business, but then that business runs by itself. It has a CEO or a general manager or something like that, and it's all decentralized, all unique. The profits go up to Warren at the holding company, but that's basically it. Whereas General Electric, Hewlett-Packard, they would be one big corporation with lots of divisions. It's all very centralized. And sure, they have individual autonomy in some situations, but it's different. And so with us, we're more like the Berkshire model. We'll buy a business, we'll hire someone to run it if the founder of that business is going to leave. And then we work closely with that new person to make sure they're doing a good job, they're getting the returns that we expect. We give them support if they need it, but otherwise they're free to run the business how they see fit. And so that was really a big turning point for us. As of January 2023 was when we kind of switched to that model. Before, we were a single team, and we said, we're going to run every business. Every time we buy a new one, we'll just take it over, and then our team had to keep growing, and then your focus gets split. Doesn't really save you any money because you have to hire new people, and your performance is not very good. And we had been thinking about making a switch to a more decentralized model for a while, and then in January we said, okay, new year, let's do it. And the results have been pretty impressive. Obviously, we're publicly traded. I can't reveal too much, but since we made that decision, there was a couple of months of transition. People had to get used to the new style. But from Q2 onwards, we've seen a big improvement in terms of things like revenue growth, profitability of the companies, efficiency, ability to get things done, focus. And so we're really excited to keep doing that. I've talked a little bit about the types of businesses we buy, basically anything that we think is a good online business. I've talked a bit about how we operate those businesses. Now, I wanted to talk a bit more about how we find them. And so I'm pretty well known in the space. The team's pretty well known. We have relationships with brokers. We have sellers who actually reach out to us and say, hey, I've been thinking about selling my business. We have people who work for us who do the opposite. They contact businesses to see if they're interested to sell. We look at marketplaces. We go to industry events. I'm recording this from a hotel because I'm in New York, and then next week I'm going to Cleveland for an industry event. We'll network with other business owners and just things like that. And so we get a lot of opportunities come our way, a lot of businesses. We typically buy ones that are around $500,000 in EBITDA to around $2 million in EBITDA. And that's kind of the sweet spot for two reasons. The first is, at that size, there's not much competition as a buyer. Those businesses are too expensive for a wealthy individual to buy, but they're kind of too small for private equity or big institutions to be interested. And that means we don't have to pay as much to acquire the business as we would if we bought something bigger. The other thing is they're large enough that they've kind of become established. They're not just like a business that made a little bit of money for a few months. They've been around for a few years. Some of them, I think the oldest one we bought was 15 years. And but at the same time, they still have room to grow. So we're able to look at their financials and we're able to actually build pro formas and ask ourselves, is this a sustainable business? If we buy it, is it going to die, or is it actually something good and we can build a foundation from? So those are the kind of reasons we operate in that space. And there's also just hundreds of opportunities in that space as well. So once we found a business and we look at it and we ask ourselves, okay, does this, on the surface, does it seem like a good business? Then we start to look at the financials. And obviously with financials, there's kind of two parts of the due diligence. The first is, do the financials tell a good story? The second is, are they real? Okay, so again, another reason why we like to buy businesses of this size is because the kind of scammers out there who are lying and maybe trying to fudge their books and stuff are much smaller. And I'm not saying larger businesses don't fudge their books, because we all know that they do, but it's generally easier to catch them at this site. So once we verify if business actually, has legitimate books, and there's ways that you can do that. You can connect to their software, you can connect to their bank accounts and see if the numbers are real. We have to ask ourselves, well, does this tell the story of a good business? So, is the financials just trending terribly down? Does it have too much concentration from one customer? Is the founder paying themselves no money? So when we hire someone to run the business, the profit margins are going to go. How do the actual gross margins compare to some of the other businesses we've seen in the space? And it's not all a financial thing. We have to ask ourselves, what's the competitive environment like? What do people think of the company? And we're good at internet stuff, so we can Google and see. You ask yourself, is the team good or are they dysfunctional? Sometimes that's good if they're dysfunctional, because that might be the problem that the business is having. And you can replace those team members and build a much better business. But generally, we want the team to be strong and working well, and just something we can come in and maybe augment with some of our experience, or help them hire one or two key people to take the business to the next level. So we'll do lots of calls with the seller of the business, with the team. We'll do lots of internal calls amongst myself and the core management team. We might bring in an expert as a consultant if it's a niche or an industry where we think it makes sense to bring in outside expert, especially if it's like a technical, like if it's a software acquisition. We usually have 2 or 3 different developers look at the software to confirm what we think, or just to tell us what the software is like. Sometimes it's very dated software. And then while all of this is happening, we're also thinking about, well, what is this thing worth? We say that we typically pay up to 4 times EBITDA for an acquisition. So if a business is making $1 million a year in profit, we might pay 4 for it, or 3.5. But then maybe we're not going to pay all of it up front. Some of it's going to be an earn-out, where if the business dies after we buy it, which, that's not wood. Hopefully that's not going to happen. We're protected. So quite often we'll have an earn-out in there. So we say to the business owner, well, if the business drops, say 20% after we acquire it, that's probably okay. But if it drops 50%, we want to pay you less money. And then the seller might say, well, how do I know you're going to not just drop it deliberately? And this is where it becomes about building relationships and networking and so on. And then we think, okay, how are we going to fund this? Are we going to raise some preferred shares, which is kind of why we're talking? Or are we going to try and get some debt? Are we going to use our own cash, our own equity? We do have a couple of million in the bank ourselves. So all of these things go in. If there's a broker involved, that usually makes things easier, but not always. Then we bring lawyers in to draft all the documents. We have third-party accountants to do an audit, and not just like a CPA audit, but a PBOAC financial audit, because we're publicly traded. We need that. And then this takes several months. There's the acquisition, the due diligence, which takes several months, and then the actual audit takes 6 to 8 weeks as well. And then at this point, sometimes we've backed out of deals because we just haven't liked what we've seen. Sometimes the seller's backed out because they don't want to wait, or they decide they don't want to sell the business after all. And really all of this is coming down to us asking ourselves the question, is this a good business? Is it a good business for us to acquire? Sometimes we find one where we think, this is good, but we don't feel confident we can run it. And then the third question is it affordable? Is the valuation something we agree with? So is it a good business? Is it good for us? Do we feel confident in our ability to run it? And can we afford it? And not just can we afford it, but is it a price that makes sense? So that's really how it works. And acquisitions basically are a muscle. We've been doing them for about 5-6 years. I've been involved in about 40 transactions, some of them as a buyer, some of them as a seller, most of them as a buyer, but sometimes working with partners, so they'll buy it and I'm the consultant. And throughout all these transactions, I've really learned not just how to get really good at due diligence, but how to kind of protect the downside as well, because every business is different. You can't kind of come into a transaction thinking you've seen everything and you're great at acquisitions. You really have to say, if I'm wrong, how painful is that going to be? What can I do to make it less painful? And then, if I'm wrong, does the acquisition still make sense? And if you can answer yes to that, then you're in business. So that's really everything. If you have any more questions about this, I'd love to talk to you, because this is what I do. I love it. And again, thank you for your time. Thank you for the questions. Keep them coming. This is great. And yes, I will see you in another video or another email sometime soon. Thank you.